Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hancock. Director Ziegler, I'm going to ask if, with your blessing, we might skip over to General Manager Davis, just because I think there's some synergy to be created with the presentation that Ms. Firestone's just given on this, and then we'll give you the final word.
Good. Sorry about that, Jay.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Leno, members of the committee. I greatly appreciate your patience sitting through what was a very informative morning. I'm Grant Davis. I'm the General Manager of the Sonoma County Water Agency, which is a wholesaler to 600,000 customers, primarily in Marin, Sonoma, and Mendocino County. But I'm also here representing the Water Bond Coalition, which is a coalition of about 40 different entities from on the coast and rural areas from Ventura all the way up the Oregon border. And so with that, I try to carry the mantle of these smaller local jurisdictions, including resource conservation districts that are a big part of delivering water in that area of the arena. Good news is I provided many of my comments in writing for the committee. So staff, Catherine's done a wonderful job here, and so I can condense and move through. It's been a long day, and I recognize that. So with that, I just want to say that we do sanitation and flood control. So we're an agency that has a tremendous breadth in terms of the need to integrate. And it's from that perspective that I bring some of the comments today. But the overarching comment is that we're a resource. Local government that is titled here is your partner. The LAO's report that was presented earlier to you today, a note that might have gone overlooked is that local jurisdictions and agencies and counties and cities provide about 80% of the funding for many of these projects. And so you look at the total combined state and federal piece, and it's really rather limited. So it's the local integration that allows these types of projects to come forward. A classic example of that would be, Laurel just mentioned the State Revolving Loan Fund. That's federal funds that come down into the state. And one very tangible example I would talk about today would be having those eligible to meet the disadvantaged communities and locals match, which is currently at 50%. If we could credit those as federal funds down to the local, it would help us qualify to make these smaller projects occur. The three items I wanted to focus on today dealt with innovation, water conservation and efficiency, and also the integrated regional water management program, because those are some of the areas where you can put immediate dollars to work and get results. Here we are in the fourth year of a drought, and I'm convinced that when it comes to water conservation and efficiency, those are dollars that you want to get out quickly, and there are plenty of great programs that require coordination. In our own case, we have 8 different retailers that come together and distribute efficient programs, swap out low efficient lawns, and put high efficient toilets back in a very coordinated way. And we're seeing tremendous benefits, and that could happen throughout the entire state. That innovation, the one aspect of this along those lines, so it's not just conservation. I think you also heard today, state legislation with groundwater management is another one that the Nature Conservancy and all of us have been watching, and this is the nexus of the need to provide upfront funding for planning and coordination. This is going to be a tall order throughout the state to come up and lift these sustainable groundwater agencies. We're going to need facilitation funds, and we're going to need to partner with whatever state assistance we can get to get those off the ground. And it's primarily because so much of the state is in rural residential form and relying on groundwater, and those are the very folks that need to organize to be active participants. So there's a great deal of work to be done there. In our own case, the one program I want to wrap up with before leading into integrated water management is the town of Windsor, which is one of our primary customers, came up with a program called PAYS. It's called Pay As You Save, and it's specifically targeted toward the multifamily residential complexes. And what I'm intrigued by about this is you can imagine communities in Orange County, Los Angeles, San Francisco adopting a program by which renters can actually take advantage of some of those programs that they're currently not able to take advantage of when they're looking at upfront providing audits that allow them to introduce water efficiencies and energy efficiencies into their buildings and pay that back over time. They're essentially guaranteed the savings. And in our case, the water agency provided about a $250,000 backstop to encourage the town of Windsor to go forward. And we're seeing millions of gallons in savings as a result of this program. And so I would really like to urge the Senate to look at ways you might work with Treasury to provide a mechanism to provide that sort of a backstop for other jurisdictions so you can capture this energy water nexus savings. Really tremendous opportunities throughout the state there to get new water and extend the savings into renters, which has been a big challenge. And then lastly, I want to highlight the fact that recycled water is becoming more and more an important part of our toolbox in meeting the needs of our region, I think statewide. And there's some provisions in here that I think need to be looked at. One would be raising the cap from 5 million to 10 million considered on recycled water projects, and then also the proportion of loans to grants. It's a very big difference there between if you can get a grant versus a loan, it helps bring on these projects faster. And that also would include lifting the $75,000 cap on planning. Planning is always so important, as you heard just moments ago, about making projects come online. And to wrap up, beyond thanking you for the opportunity, which I greatly appreciate, and your patience, is the Integrated Water Management Program. And that's one where I think, talk about forcing people to work together. You have 4 different components in integrated plans that are chartered by the Department of Water Resources. You have the flood control, the water supply, the sanitation, and the habitat. And it's creating hydrologic regions that have to work together to secure state funding. And that's an incentive to have us work together. It's not a natural fit. The state leadership is what I'm convinced has made this possible. We represent 2 agencies. One is the North Coast Resource Partnership, which is 7 counties, Sonoma up to Oregon. I'm also heavily involved in the Bay Area, which is the 9-county region, both of which require state involvement for the planning and to continue to coordinate to meet all those multiple objectives. So the Senate has a huge role to play. I think your oversight hearing today is a real good step in the right direction. I know you have more to come, but I will wrap up and make sure that I leave time for my colleagues and any questions.
We really appreciate your joining us today, Mr. Davis, and for any number of really valuable suggestions that you've made. We're taking notes. And thank you, Mr. Ziegler, for your patience.
Great. Mr. Chair, members, thank you very much for the opportunity on behalf of the Nature Conservancy to appear before the committee today. We do support, we were active supporters of Proposition 1 based on this whole systems approach, really recognizing that the Sierra Nevada watershed provides 60% of the water for Californians. Down through the Delta to reduce reliance on the Delta, to support regional supply reliability, and to invest in watersheds from the top to the bottom of California as really holistic values that are necessary to have all of us buy in to more effective use of water conservation. And certainly as a frequent associate and work with Josh Veers, I will embrace the comment that we are all in on more pop for the drop. So let's make that work together. I want to second the importance of really focusing on the local assistance programs. As Laurel and Grant have noted, they're really essential to make the groundwater management program work in a way that brings local governments into the picture in an effective way, as well as providing an effective mechanism to implement clean and safe drinking water programs. So I think I want to start with that foundation, that the Conservancy feels like we build public confidence in wider conservation values if we can effectively demonstrate that we're delivering water for those people that are most in need, and addressing California's most pressing issues of groundwater overdraft around the state. I want to focus on a couple of areas where we think that the work of the administration and the Senate can be most helpful in potentially accelerating delivery of funds. We do believe there's a great opportunity to integrate Proposition 1 and Prop 1E funding for multi-benefit projects that are good for flood protection, good for multiple values, including groundwater recharge, and good certainly for habitat needs across the state. In recognizing the accelerating toll of the drought on fisheries and wildlife, we also believe that there are opportunities there, especially over the long-term funding plan that the administration has put forward to accelerate investments in habitat restoration, as well as in providing greater certainty for the delivery of water for California's wildlife refuges, which are an essential link in the Pacific Flyway. we do believe also that it's imperative in its guidelines that the administration and the legislature demonstrate incentives and recognize the importance of bringing multiple funding sources to the table: federal funding, regional funding, local funding, and private funding to stretch public dollars. We think that's absolutely essential as part of the equation. With regard to the role of conservancies, the Nature Conservancy is a statewide organization. We have found the 10 conservancies established by the legislature as essential partners in building a fabric of wide support for conservation values and bringing together local communities, bringing together different diverse interest groups to actually work together and collaboratively fund, implement, and monitor and buy in to the conservation values that local conservancies can deliver. So we share the committee's interest in making sure that the conservancies are an effective partner in implementing programs authorized under Proposition 1. And finally, we believe that the bond, Proposition 1, as Chair Marcus noted, is not the complete solution, but it's an essential solution to providing the right kind of framework for incentives that do allow us to better stretch water resources for people, the economy, and the environment. And we look forward to working with the committee and the administration as you move forward and developing a framework that the public understands and that one that delivers accountability for the expenditures in the bond. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ziegler, for your presentation. And thanks also to the Nature Conservancy for your assistance in the crafting of the bond. And I think we can all acknowledge that it was because of your voice in the process that it did go to the voters with the unanimous vote of the legislature. So again, our thanks.
Thank you.
Colleagues, any questions? Yes, Senator Nielsen.
Mr. Ziegler, as far as your thoughts about what we can do in the watershed regions, a lot of which I represent, do you see some smaller impoundments in the watershed region that's helpful for storage of water, for groundwater recharge, which can be part of it, controlling siltation, flowing down into the major tributaries? Is that something you see a part of the deal?
Yeah, we've been actively involved with a number of stakeholders along the Sacramento River water agencies, trying to work together to put together innovative solutions in water management. And we do believe that the kind of approach that you're talking about in looking at the need to impound and more carefully control water for groundwater recharge into floodplains is really an essential part of long-term sustainable water management.
I see that of value. I don't see it as the highest value because we need the bigger storage, but it does fit into the picture. I would not see that kind of storage at the expense of the major storage facilities, but it is a part of the plan in the long term, I see. Okay, thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Senator Nielsen. No other questions? I know we have some patient stakeholders who have sat through the hearing to address us through public comment. So thank you all for being with us today and for your expertise shared with us. So is the line all-inclusive of those who would like to participate in public comment? We got a few more, just trying to get a sense of how many we have here today. So, of course, everyone is welcome. If you can keep your comments as succinct as possible, we would appreciate it, but we are here for you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for that, too, not just saying you got 30 seconds or a minute. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Leno, and members of the committee that are left. I'm Danny Merkley, Director of Water Resources for the California Farm Bureau. Keep my comments very brief, but I'd like to preface them by saying that I've had a very long working relationship with Jay Ziegler and with the TNC, have nothing but the utmost respect for them, as well as Grant Davis and the Sonoma County Water Agency. But I think there's a glaring missing piece to the panel, and that would be agricultural representation. We do work with them, but they clearly are not in a good position to represent agriculture. So I would like to reiterate what I heard earlier, that maybe we have another opportunity for agriculture to be represented and to explain the impacts on this very important issue to agriculture. What I would say also is that I've worked with both Senator Nielsen and Senator Wolk for over 30 years, even in my farming operation up against the city limits of Davis on both sides, worked with Senator Wolk on water issues back in the day when she was just a little old city mayor. So not old, never mind. I'll quit digging while I'm in the hole here. So with these flashier storm systems that we're seeing, the reduced Sierra snowpack, new surface storage is very important. You know, I can take a bucket and pour water into a large bucket much more quickly than I can pour it through a coffee filter and coffee grounds and get it into the same spot. We need that to be able to capture the gulps when they're available, the excess water, and be able to then use it not only for flows that the water board is working on, but then also for recharging groundwater at a later date. Just point out, when agriculture uses a fair amount of water, we've done a lot to improve efficiencies over the last 40 years. We're some 40, 50% more productive using the same amount of water that we did 40 years ago. But it takes about 1,900, everybody's got a little different figures, but roughly 1,912 gallons of water to produce the 3 meals a day for the caloric intake for one individual in this state. So I would submit to you, maybe it's not agriculture using that 1,900 gallons of water, but it's the consumer. There's a lot of talk about some certain commodities that use a lot of water. I would point out that after the tsunami in Japan, the increased request for containers of almonds going over there was significant because it was a non-perishable, high-protein commodity that they needed when they didn't have electricity and refrigeration and so on. But
Mr. Merkley, I want to help keep you succinct.
I'm going to stop there. There's a number of things that need to be addressed from agriculture standpoint, so I would ask and hope that you have an additional hearing. Sorry, I went longer than I planned.
That's okay. Thank you.
Senator Leno and other members, Valerie Nero for the California Chamber of Commerce. We also agree with Senator Nielsen's comments about the need for surface storage for water. As business community looks at investing in an area, we look to see if the resources are going to be there for the next 20, 30, 50 years. It's extremely important in our planning processes that that be available to us. So we would actually ask, if you have another hearing, if you could also ask the business community to come to the table and add our perspective.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Leno and members of the committee. I'm Kathy Cole with the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. For Southern California, a reliable water supply isn't a choice between importing water and expanding local efforts such as new local supplies and increased conservation. Metropolitan and its member agencies have been busy for years at a multifaceted portfolio approach by diversifying water supply and demand initiatives. I had earlier planned to give you some of the details about the investments that the region has made since the early 80s, but in the interest of hunger pangs, I will defer that until I have an opportunity to meet with members of Sub 2 and members of the committee as a whole.
You're a wise woman.
I know. The cost, as you know, to develop and maintain these supplies are a significant hurdle to initiating new projects. We just recently increased our incentive programs at Metropolitan for our member agencies, and so funding from that and the water bond will certainly go a long way towards making those local investments more cost-effective and sustainable through our 6-county service area. I was asked to identify maybe a point that I might want to bring to the attention of the committee in the near term. We'd like to work with members of the committee to maybe clarify or explore whether or not the $100 million that's set aside in the bond under the Regional Water Reliability Chapter for Ag and Urban Conservation may be available for regional rebate programs outside of an integrated regional water management plan. I'm not quite clear on whether or not that's eligible purpose, but we'd like to explore that as an opportunity. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Ms. Cole.
Mr. Chairman, Richard Harris of the Nossman firm on behalf of water reuse. I'll just make 2 quick points. One is Mr. Davis's references to some things that the recycled water community thinks needs to be changed with maybe the cap and of some more money for planning and all of that. We're working with the water board to try to make that happen too. And we think that in their next set of guidelines, that's going to be there so we can get these water recycling projects out faster. One thing I want to tee up for the subcommittee, though, and maybe this could be of interest to you as you move forward, is let's take a look at, first off, the $131 million for recycling is a lot of money, and we really appreciate it, and we're going to do everything we can to get that out the door. But we've identified somewhere between about $5 billion worth of projects that could be up and running in the next 3 to 5 years, and $131 million is great. And we want to make sure that we don't come in and say, oh, give us all of this $600 million that's in there for recycling in 1 year unless we could spend it. So we're doing a very in-depth survey of all of our members to see who really is where in the process and what could you spend if you could get it in this first year. And it might be a good topic for the subcommittee to look at to see if that 131 maybe ought to go to 231 or 3 or 4, given the constraints of course, their ability to process it and do it. Water Board's doing a great job. We really appreciate it. But this is not a new program, and that goes to Senator Wolk's comments before. So we look forward to working with you. We look forward to bringing you that information, and we look forward to putting more recycled water out in the streets. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Harris.
Good afternoon, Chair Leno. My name is Vicki Sackstetter. I'm with San Juan Water District. We're a wholesale and retailer here in the Sacramento area, East Sacramento. And I just wanted to say, as we face climate change and the related reduction in California's snowpack, new storage projects, both above and below ground, are critical to the success of California's future growth and our environmental stewardship. We need new storage solutions, the construction of sites and temperance flat reservoirs, combined with water conservation, water markets, and coordinated operation of existing surface reservoirs and groundwater basins, will bolster California's water supply reliability and will serve future generations in California. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Saxton.
Good afternoon. I'm Wendy Ritterbush with the Association of California Water Agencies, or ACWA. As a statewide association representing over 430 public water agencies throughout California, many of whom are actually going to be implementing Prop 1 on the ground, we would like to offer some suggestions for implementation of strategy in 3 general areas. One's efficiency. We feel that for many funding categories, as we're echoing comments that have been made throughout the presentation today, that the state agencies can really get the money out the door quickly. They don't have to wait on a lot of these programs. And I think it's even more key because of the drought that they speed it up. The Brown administration is obviously moving really quickly to get the guidelines process moving, and we really appreciate their urging the state agencies to move in an expeditious fashion. I think effectiveness, we really want to make sure that the money is treated in a meaningful way and that the guidelines reflect that. For instance, as was mentioned before by Grant Davis, there's a $5 million cap right now in the existing water recycling guidelines that could easily be raised. Right now, it's going to preclude certain key projects from ever really being eligible for funding in that category. And then the third, accountability. ACWA really feels strongly that we need to track the implementation of these bond funds. Like, for example, when money goes to water storage, how much storage is created on that? How much are we getting returned for that investment? I think that's something long-term that we would really like to know. Thank you.
Great points. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Steve Cruz on behalf of the California building industry. So I think first I wanted to start with a thank you for the bond is critical to housing and development. And so your work in crafting the bond and delivering, I think it was 118 votes in support was very impressive. And so now as we can move to implementation, I would echo the comments made throughout the day about moving efficiently and deliberately, of course, through the process. As you know, for housing development, we have to plan on a 20-year horizon as a result of the Show Me the Water laws. And so projects that are before local councils and local governments today have to demonstrate a dedicated funding source for those projects 20 years out. So the faster that you move, the faster that less projects are threatened at the local level. And they're all important to us. Senator Nielsen had mentioned surface storage. That's certainly critical. Groundwater storage, but recycled water, conservation. Home builders have come a long way in making homes more efficient, so that's an important component to it. Desalination, all those things are very important. And I think I guess the last thing I would say was just to sort of guard against, rewriting the bond in ways that aren't consistent with the will of the legislature, our voters, and I think that's important. And really want to continue to work with this committee, and we'll welcome the opportunity to come at a later date if you think that's important to have a further input. So thank you again.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cruz.
Thank you. My name is Michael Quigley. I'm the Deputy Director with the California Alliance for Jobs. We represent 2,500 union construction contractors and over 80,000 union construction workers in Northern and Central California. We were big supporters of Prop 1 this last November. And I think that one of the reasons that it really passed and this year gathered so much support with the voters was the reliability of our water supply. I think people are increasingly concerned about the effects of climate change and how that is impacting our ability to have water at the tap, as brought up several times during the course of this hearing today. So I think part of the main elements of reliability is going to be maintaining a sufficient supply with a future that's looking like we're going to continue to have these cycles of drought years, and then with one deluge year where we're full of water, we have to adapt our new infrastructure to fit this cycle. And I think a key component of that is going to be surface storage, to where we can capture the water when it falls instead of out of a slow trickle out of the mountains when it's falling from the sky in a short amount of time. I would appreciate this committee having an additional hearing on the storage aspect. I think that the groundwater and storage work best when they're done in tandem, and you can't really just have a safe and reliable supply with one over the other. So I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Quigley.
Good afternoon. I'm Rick Johnson. I'm the Executive Director of the Sacramento Area Flood Control Agency. And 5 Central Valley urban agencies, Sutter Butte Flood Control Agency, the San Joaquin Area Flood Control Agency, the Three Rivers Levee Improvement Authority, the West Sacramento Flood Control Agency, and the Sacramento Area Flood Control Agency. We've been successful in partnering with DWR in implementing important flood risk reduction projects in our urban areas. And as was mentioned earlier, we collaborated to develop a proposal which we submitted to DWR that outlined our near-term funding requirements to continue to support our urban projects under the Urban Flood Risk Reduction Program. However, it is important to our agencies to receive certainty regarding the availability of state funding in the near future. This certainty is needed to secure local funding and financing, to acquire needed right-of-way, maintain local support, and take other actions required to implement our projects. So we know DWR's budget proposal includes a request for early appropriations, and we support this request as one of the tools DWR needs to be able to meet our need for funding commitments as early as possible. So we have specific examples we could give you. In the interest of time, I won't now, but if you'd like them, we could. But I just wanted to end by thanking the state. There's been a lot of projects that have been built in our areas that could not have been built over the last few years without state funding, and we look forward to continue working with DWR on continuing the process. So
Great. Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Juan Altamirano. I am Associate Director with Public Policy with Audubon, California. First off, we want to thank you for your leadership in the oversight in the appropriations of Prop 1 funding. So let me start by saying that we support for the need for flexibility in the guidelines of state agencies so that multi-benefit and innovative conservation programs can compete for state funding. And then we also want to echo the need for adequate funding for water refuges. In addition, we want to echo the need and for appropriate and adequate funding for groundwater. We believe that this addresses the necessary pragmatic and common sense long-term thinking we need to have to build the 21st century water system that we want to have here in California. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, sir. Anyone else like to speak before we come back to the committee? Some eager colleagues. Senator Nielsen.
Mr. Chairman, in closing, I want to thank you very much for the hearing and for the courtesies that you extended at the end. That's more akin to the way it used to be in the legislature. People got to talk a little bit more than 30 seconds and say hi, goodbye. I appreciate that, and particularly since the folks at the end have a very important message for us. And that is emphasizing the need for some subsequent hearing where some of these other voices can be heard in greater length. We did about almost 3.5 hours of other testimony, and then these folks were confined to, a while. But you were generous in not cutting them off. But could we expect an hour on a subsequent hearing or some extended time in subcommittees that we can get this kind of testimony?
That's certainly a conversation you can be having with our sub-2 chair, Senator Wolk, and her hearing in March and another hearing in April, so I'm sure all voices can be accommodated.
That's going to be really important. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Nielsen. Senator Wolk.
And Mr. Chair, I want to thank you for conducting an excellent hearing and staff for putting together excellent panelists and just highlighting all the issues. I really appreciate that. Just one comment, and I want to address this to Mr. Johnson. It's good to meet you. I represent this area, and I recognize the projects you're suggesting. None of them will make the difference between an appropriation in March or in June. And we should talk more about that.
Thank you, Senator. I want to thank the entire committee. Let me also offer my thanks to the staff who assembled a very comprehensive airing of all the many issues that we're going to be dealing with regard to both the remaining funds in Prop 1E and the implementation of the voters' will in Proposition 1 and dealing with the drought relief as well. Again, beginning of a conversation, hardly the completion. We've got many other hearings through the budget sub-process in the coming months, so please stay tuned. And I also want to make sure everyone is aware that our committee's overview of the governor's budget proposal, otherwise known as our annual Red Book, is now available online. So if you're interested, all of our thoughts with regard to the proposal are to be found in it. And I thank you all for your attention today. We are adjourned. Thank you, Mark.